Will you be?
There we go.
Hello. Will you be using the image of myself as well as the voice part?
Yeah, I'll do a screenshot.
Okay. Okay, just to know.
Yeah, and then the whole video will be on my YouTube channel, and then I'll do like a transcription of some of the answers in an article.
Great. Okay.
Cool. So we ready to go?
Yes.
All right. So wanted to ask you some questions about Severance.
Yes.
Amazing show. Love it.
Thank you.
And I'm just wondering, kind of what was the philosophy behind the costuming of the characters? Because there's the characters at work, and then there's the characters at home, and they don't know each other.
No, they don't. I mean, they are the same person. They're just a severed person. So the people on the inside, the innies, are the severed people of the outside people, and they are, they're almost childlike in that they sort of wake up in this new reality and their kind of new consciousness, whereas the outies are sort of more of the characters' true selves. They're the person they've always been. They just have chosen to undergo this procedure and turn off this part of their consciousness for now.
So you see a lot more of their personality in the home life.
Well, the true self. I mean, you see personalities in both. They're just different personalities, even though they're the same person.
Gotcha. The look of the show and Lumen is kind of sterile and monotone and kind of drab colors. So how much room did you have to play with colors within that world? Because I noticed some of the episodes, like Hallie's wearing an orange blouse, which sticks out a lot.
Right.
So how much room did you have to play with color?
I guess it was a choice to have the sets be really spare and minimal. It was like almost working within like a sort of Kubrick world. I thought they were really beautiful and elegant in their sort of minimalness. And we did, we had a green carpet down there and white walls, which dictated a lot. And because it was a kind of canned fluorescent lighting, it was difficult to get colors to read true on film. So we did a lot of color tests ahead of time. And so we were looking at how different colors looked down there and which colors looked the best and which colors would serve the characters the best. We also kind of had a lot of control over what the characters were wearing on the severed floor. Like everything else at Lumen, and especially in that inner sanctum there, everything is very controlled. And we imagined they had a dress code handbook, which specified that they had to wear certain kind of office attire. So, we were keeping, for men, we were keeping it, suits and shirts and ties and shoes. And for the women, it was skirts and tops or dresses and practical shoes. The colors were fairly neutral throughout, except for Hallie, who I felt like was a real sort of focal character. And we kind of wanted to, I felt like we wanted to focus some of the attention on her and being the only woman in the group. And also because we find out later, spoiler alert, that she is Helena Egan, that maybe she was given a little bit more leeway, just little things, we kind of snuck in there.
Yeah, for sure. And that answered the question of, why were they taking so many pictures of Hallie specifically? That's kind of the answer to that in the end. It's like, oh, that's why.
Yes. So it was, because it's a big sort of publicity stunt for her to do this.
Right. Another thing that I thought was very interesting was kind of the use of routine. We see a lot of Mark S's routine where he's going to work and coming back from work. He stops and he takes off the watch and he takes off his thing and he puts on a different watch and kind of becomes this other person and then goes in the elevator and he's gone.
Again, it's like rules, there are only certain things you can take down to the severed floor. And because of the code detector in the elevator, the watches couldn't have logos on them.
Okay.
Or writing of any kind. So they had to have these Lumen issue watches. They also didn't want them to have smart watches or anything where they might be able to somehow communicate with the outside. So the watches were company issue, plain face, no logo, so they could go down through the code detector and back up. So basically they leave all of their real true selves at the door. His coat comes off. He changes out of his boots into his company shoes. He puts on his company ID badge. Anything that is personal to that outside person gets left in those lockers. And they go down fully attired in the kind of dress code handbook rule outfit. And that was pretty much what that was all about, was just sort of like leaving yourself at the door there.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really interesting about the watches. I didn't even realize that it was watches that had no logo or anything on them, but that totally makes sense.
No, they have marks for the hours, but they don't, it's not a branded item. There's no branded items or anything with writing on it on that severed floor because it couldn't get through the code detector.
Oh, that's really interesting. Another character that I thought was very interesting was Mrs. Copel.
Yes.
And the reveal that she's the neighbor, although I suspected it right before she talked to Mark, and I'm like, I knew it. But at work, she's very buttoned up. She's very cold.
Well, at work,
very businesslike.
Yeah, at work, she's Cobell, and she's the boss down there of the severed floor. She's also unsevered, so she's aware of what's happening inside and out. And when she's Mrs. Selvig, who is Mark's next door neighbor, she's not Miss Cobell anymore. It's like an act she's putting on of this kind of warm, kind woman who owns a candle store, who lives next door, who's, doing macrame.
Checking in on her neighbor.
Yeah. And, Marx doesn't recognize her because he doesn't remember her from the severed floor. But she's really she's the same person. She's putting on an act. I mean, that whole Miss Selvig is a put on to kind of get to Mark, to make Mark trust her and, feel like she's harmless and, is somewhat of a, motherly figure, kind neighbor.
Yeah. Trustworthy.
Yeah. So they're two very different characters from a costuming point of view. Cobell, although we rarely see Cobell out of her work attire, the only time is at night in the house when she's in those nightgowns. The rest of the time when we see her during the day outside, it's always, dressed as the character of Miss Selvig, who doesn't really exist.
Yeah, it's all like scarves and sweaters and like warm, fuzzy, literally clothes.
Patchwork and yes, hand knitted things.
Yeah. You were speaking earlier about sort of a dress code at work, and there's different departments there. We mostly see the, macro data refinement, but then optics and design comes in a little bit, and then we see a lot of those two departments. So was there dress codes within the departments?
Well, here's how yes, somewhat. Everyone who reports to work at Lumen to work as a severed employee follows the handbook, the dress code in the handbook. So they come to work in office attire. Once they go down, they may work in different departments. Right now, we're only seeing 2 departments down there, but maybe there's other departments they don't know about. But once you're assigned to a department, depending on what the task you do there is, you would be, if, for example, optics and design, O&D, they do a lot of printing and art handling. So I gave them smocks to wear over their office attire that say O&D, but they can't wear those on the outside because, in the same way that the innies don't really know what's happening on the outside, the people on the outside really don't know what's happening down there or what they do down there. So those things, I thought it was more interesting that they would be given this piece of, these smocks that would all say O&D. So that's why they had those. And then we have a brief moment with the goats where
Yeah.
a handler with the goats, and he's also in the suit, but he has a work apron on over, and he's holding the goats because he's down there in the goat pen, So the idea was just that no one can really know what they do. So all the pieces that they get down there had to be things that could go over what they've come in.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. Speaking of characters, Rickon is really like a bonkers character.
He is. I love that character too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he's annoying as all get out, but then he becomes like their savior towards the end.
Their hero. Hero. Yeah.
Their hero. That book, I think it was orange colored book, so another burst of color in that drab world. Talk a little bit about.
Yeah, well, he's a self-help. I think he takes himself very seriously. He's a self-help book author, and he's sort of, like a new age guru type. And, I think he's a little bit, Mark mocks him on the outside, but then on the inside, when he finds the book as an innie who's this sort of innocent, he's totally taken in by it and worships him. So it's funny that 2 different ways that Mark and then I think Rickon sort of is really thrilled at the end when Mark when his spoiler again, but when
his innie and outie,
his innie is out and he's thinking he's the greatest thing, but generally speaking, I mean, we just wanted him to be I didn't want him to be a joke because he's Devon's husband, and he's a, I think he's a good guy, but he just has been, taking himself a little seriously. And as I said, he's this kind of new age guru. So we played with this sort of Nehru collar and a mystical necklace, and it was fun. We had a good time.
Yeah. And then, spoiler alert again, we discover towards the end that Hallie is actually Lumen royalty. And when she meets her outie, which is herself, she's at a big fundraising event, and she's all dressed to the nines and all of that. So what was kind of the reasoning behind the look, and how did you put that together for Hallie?
Well, she's at a black tie fundraiser, so she had to be in a gown. I loved the idea of bringing in the blue and green from Lumen. There's a big blue and green kind of cross across the front of the dress. She looks very polished. It's important that she look, somewhat wealthy, and strong and confident. Those were all things I was striving to do for her in that scene.
And the jewelry and all
the
that
jewelry,
stuff.
Yes, the jewelry, the blue and green earrings. Again, we pulling the blue and green from the dress, and they are expensive looking, and she is the heir apparent. I wanted it to be a little bit regal.
Yeah, she is royalty.
Yeah.
Were there any characters in particular on the show that you think kind of best represented themselves by the way they looked, whether they're innie or they're outie? I suppose probably they're outie because their innies were all pretty similar looking, but the glimpses we saw of the different characters in their outside lives.
I don't know. I mean, I think they all, I try to costume them all to reflect their characters, whether they're in or out. I can't think of one that particularly stands out to me. As I said, I try to give all my children equal attention. Sorry for the
I can't remember his name, but gosh, one of the characters who is part of Illumin, he gives them the jazz dance party or whatever.
Milchick?
Yeah.
Milchick, yes.
Milchick. So
yeah.
Milchick, he's buttoned down the whole time, but then when that party happens, he's got short sleeves or he's got something colorful on and he just gets down and he dances with himself. And
well, he was actually wearing long sleeves. He was wearing a turtleneck in that.
Oh, that's what it was. Instead of a shirt and tie.
Right. We figured, there was a moment where we were like, let's have a little fun with this. Maybe he dressed up for the musical dance experience. Maybe he had this moment where he was like going to come in with his, musical instruments, and we just, let loose a little bit there. We thought it would, he's in the same costume for practically the whole series. Because it was almost like a uniform of sorts. So it was a nice way to kind of break that up and have that moment where he got himself all together for this party that he was going to give the innies. So
yeah, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a season 2.
There is.
Any
yes.
hints you can give us about other departments we might see, or?
I can't tell you.
Yeah, they put you in the basement.
I just will say that there's going to be a lot more. It's going to be very exciting.
Cool. Yeah, we know there's so much more to the Lumen headquarters than we even started to see.
We'll see more of both the inside world and the outside world.
Oh, great. I love it. What other projects do you have coming up?
Well, right now I was actually working on a film that went down after a few months.
Oh no.
Pulled the plug. So, and it actually worked out well because it would have been maybe an overlap. So I've already started working on season 2. So that's what I'm working on, season 2 now.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking today. I love the show. I love the costuming on it, and I love chatting about costuming and philosophy behind it and all that. So
thank you.
I look forward to season 2.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you. All right.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Cheers.